lovely people. Welcome to a bit of a mammoth book haul.
Sophie vlogs.
I said in the last time I did a haul that I essentially have just not updated you on most of the books I've bought this year. I had planned to do like one mega haul that was going to cover everything. And then I was very kindly, my work gave me a bonus, but it was specifically in the form of voucher to an independent bookshop that I really like. So I got to have the experience of buying so many books in one go, like more books than I have ever bought in one go, ever, but without it actually costing me any money. And then I thought to myself, let's split this into two, otherwise it's going to get way too big. So there'll be this one, and then there'll be one more at some point, and then I will actually be up to date with all of the books that I bought this year. And now I'm planning to not really buy any books for the rest of the year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off with all of the books that I bought in this one glorious moment, and then the rest of this I'll try and theme a little bit by like genre or something like that. So to dive into my book voucher books, I essentially sort of just turned up to the bookshop and just let myself go where my whim took me. That whim included food writing cravings, so I thought I would start with those. The first of the food writing books that I picked up was Takeaway Stories from a Childhood Behind the Counter by Angela Hui. This was on my radar, I think, because I read an interview with her in something like Wales Today, a Welsh publication for sure, where she talked about her experience growing up of her family being the only Chinese family anywhere near where she lived. And they run a Chinese takeaway, and this is her memoir about that time of her life. I think this sounds really fab. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I've heard so many good things. I also picked up Small Fires, an epic in the kitchen by Rebecca May Johnson. This is one that a lot of foodie people that I follow on Instagram have really been enjoying. So people like Ella Risbridger and Kate Young have been posting about this. It's sort of very much depicted as being like all about the joy of cooking and sort of reinventing this relationship we have with the kitchen. It's quite small, but I think it's written in quite a poetic manner, I believe. So I'm very intrigued to see what that is actually like. I also picked up The Philosophy of Curry by Sejal Sukhadwala, which is published by the British Library. This is just a very small little look at the concept of curry, of like what the concept of curry is, what the history is, also like how it has developed in contemporary culture and that kind of thing. I think that sounds really interesting. And the other piece of food writing I picked up in this great flurry was Tasting the Past, Recipes from Antiquity by Jacqui Wood. This is the first one of these books which is specifically looking at Celtic and Roman recipes, and that is why I was super interested in it. There is a second one that I believe is like Georgian and Victorian recipes. I'm not interested in that, I don't think, because that's just not an era where the food particularly interests me. But I have actually read this one already, and it was really fascinating reading all of the like archaeological evidence for particularly the Celtic section, which is much bigger than the Roman section. The archaeological evidence for what she has based the recipes on. So this is one that I'm definitely going to try and cook some things from soon. I also picked up 3 more pieces of non-fiction in that particular moment, which included by The Hidden Culture, History and Science of Bisexuality by Julia Shaw. If I don't have any non-fiction queer books on my book trolley, I get itchy. I just always like to have a piece of queer non-fiction lined up and ready. So this was just one that really tempted me. Every time I hold up that book, I get that moment from Friends. Ross is talking to Susan, and he's like, "Wow, you sure have a lot of books about being a lesbian," and she's like, "Well, they make you take a test." That's how I feel about this book. I also have the Seaweed Collector's Handbook by Miek Zwamborn, which is all about seaweed. I have been really enjoying little nature writing that is like focused on specific concepts. So for example, been doing some fungi ones, been doing like gathering moss, which is all about moss. And then I read one about shells recently, Spirals in Time, that was also fab. And I'm just sort of hoping for the same thing, but with seaweed. I feel like seaweed and I could be very good friends. And so this is hopefully going to be a fabulous introduction to it. And then the final non-fiction in this particular part of the haul is In the House of the Interpreter, a memoir by Inuiwa Thiong'o. I don't know what order I'm posting my videos. I believe my September wrap-up will already be up by the time this goes up, and the first book I talk about in that is The Wizard of the Crow, which is by the same author, and I absolutely loved it. It was a 5-star read for me. I thought it was utterly brilliant. This is Inuiwa Thiong'o's memoir. He is a very famous Kenyan writer, but also he was imprisoned and did a lot of his writing in exile outside of Kenya. And he's someone who I don't know the hugest amount about. I only know very small things. And so I, as well as wanting to continue exploring his fiction, I'm also really interested to learn more about him and his actual experiences, how that background is also like influencing his fiction, because I think potentially if I understood more about stuff like Kenyan politics, then I would get more out of his writing as well. So very intrigued to dive into this one. The fiction books that I picked up in this mega joyous moment that I had in the bookshop, it was literally ridiculous. It was me and the woman at the till, because I took a day off to do it. And we just had a lovely little chat while I picked out books, and it was really, really nice. So I went for one that is absolutely everywhere on Booktube at the moment. But this is, I always want to say Babel. I know that she says to pronounce it Babel, so I just, in my little brain. By R.F. Kuang. I have not read any R.F. Kuang before, but this sounds so interesting. To my understanding, this is based in Oxford. We are following someone who is like in the position of being a scholar there. I believe that we are looking at concepts such as academia, colonialism, linguistics and language, like empire, like this concept of like having to like stand against an institution but also being torn by wanting to be accepted by the institution. I just hear nothing but praise for this, and it sounds super intriguing, so I'm gonna give it a go. I also picked up Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. This is a independent bookshop edition, so it has these amazing sprayed edges. This is like a fictionalized retelling of Medusa's story. I really, really loved Natalie Haynes's Pandora's Jar. It is literally here. It was fabulous. It was non-fiction writing on women in Greek myth. And since then, I have picked up pretty much every fiction that she has written. I haven't actually read any of them yet. Just adding this to the stack of Natalie Haynes that I have to read, but I really do hope to do one of her fiction books before the end of the year for sure. The next little temptation that came home with me was Mischief Acts by Zoe Gilbert. This is on my radar, I believe, because of Jen at Jen Campbell. Why this hooked me is Herne the Hunter. All I needed to hear was Herne the Hunter, and I was on board because I watched too much Robin of Sherwood as a child, and as such have always been drawn to Herne the Hunter as a mythical figure. This is very much drawing on like that folkloric kind of background. I believe we are jumping a lot through time. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to end up feeling about this, because I understand that the form varies quite a lot throughout. So there are sections of this that are told almost in like verse. There are sections that are told in very different styles to each other. This is what intrigued me, is a shapeshifter. Herne dons many guises as he slips and ripples through time, at lantern-lit Twelfth Night theatrics, at the spectacular burning of the Crystal Palace, at an acid-laced 60s party. Wherever he goes, transgression, debauch, and enchantment always follow in his wake. But it's like as the forest that he is from becomes increasingly encroached upon, like I'm assuming that his very being becomes at risk in some kind, something like that. I am hoping to just go with the narrative style and to hopefully end up really enjoying that. One that I picked up because of Anna Marie at Actual Spinster, who apparently is one of the most influential people on my book buying habits. Who knew? Is Lote by Shola von Reinhold, because she has sung the praises of this book so highly, so often. I know we are following someone who becomes very interested in the bright young things of the 1920s and discovers, what is her name? Oh, and then after discovering a photograph of the forgotten black modernist poet Hermia Druitt, who ran in the same circles as the bright young things that she adores, Matilda becomes transfixed and resolves to learn as much about a mysterious figure. And then she sort of, through trying to uncover the history of this woman, she becomes involved in like secret societies and all that kind of thing, and she sort of falls down a little hole, I believe. So this definitely sounds very intriguing. I'm looking forward to understanding why Anna Marie loves it so much. I also picked up Tower by Bae Myung-hoon, which is translated by Sung Ryu, which is a series of interconnected short stories that all gear around this tower. If anyone is a fan of 70s space rock band Hawkwind, they have a song called High Rise. It's really giving me vibes of that. It's set in a 674-story skyscraper and sovereign nation. And that as a concept sounds so intriguing. I don't always enjoy short story collections, but I feel like short story collection that is interconnected short stories potentially is going to work really well for me. And I feel like this concept of high rises are so tapped into this like dystopian look at this world. I don't know, as well as the Hawkwind song, there's a film about high rises that's based on a book, probably the same book that the Hawkwind song is based on, I would imagine. But I think it's a concept that lends itself to this look at like what happens if you just absolutely strip away all joy from humanity and stick them in a gigantic box and give them no access to the outside, you know? The final book that I bought in this immense session was The Makioka Sisters by Tanizaki, which is translated by Edward Seidensticker. We are set in the years leading up to the Second World War. We are following these set of sisters, the Makioka sisters. I believe it is a little bit of a clash of like old Japan with this newer Japan that was developing, and also like the Second World War itself. This is one of those ones which ages ago now I mentioned that I was really interested in reading more like classics of other countries that I've not read many classics from. I can't remember if someone specifically recommended this to me or if I found it while I was doing my research into that, but that is why this is on my radar. Moving on to the rest of this book haul, I thought I would initially talk about some mystery books that I picked up, starting with this beautiful set of 3, which is technically a set of 9. Each of these Agatha Christie collections have these beautiful embossed aspects to them, but they are each a collection of 3. So this is Murder on the Orient Express, Death in the Clouds, Why Didn't They Ask Evans, 450 from Paddington, Lord Edgware Dies, Murder in Mesopotamia, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, They Do It With Mirrors, and Mrs. McGinty's Dead. I have read some of these ones that are included, but I don't own all of these. I just think that this is such a stunning matching set. My Agatha Christie's, I have now moved here. I did a bit of a shuffle. These are going to sit very much next to these lovely editions. I am just so enjoying reading mystery at the moment. There is something about the mystery genre that makes me think a lot about how the genre is crafted and that kind of thing. Agatha Christie is someone who I do want to eventually read all of her books, so when I see stunning collections like this, I am very much drawn to them. Some mystery books that I picked up on Kindle recently include The Inugami Curse by Seishi Yokomizo, which is translated by Yumika Yakakazi, and The Village of Eight Graves, which is also by Seishi Yokomizo, but this one is translated by Brian Karetnik. These are both by the same author who I have read the first book, The Honjin Murders, before, which I talked about in my August reading wrap-up. He is an extremely well-known crime writer in the Japanese crime writing scene. The thing I enjoyed about his novel, the first one, was about sort of the self-awareness of genre that he was working within. It was not one where I felt hugely connected to the characters, but it was one that I found to be an interesting setup and way of writing a murder mystery. So I believe the Inugami Curse is about the head of a clan who, at his funeral, as his will is being read, it's very contentious and lots of family secrets and scandal come out. And then I think the Village of Eight Graves is potentially one that sounded a bit more like a closed situation. Like, I think maybe there's an island and people being picked off, something like that. But yes, I'm very interested in just exploring a few more of his works to see how they are. And then I also picked up Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz, which is another murder mystery that is very literary and self-aware. I believe this is one, I picked it up a while ago and I can't really remember the full plot description, but it's definitely got an aspect to do with this murder mystery, which I believe the person who is murdered is a murder mystery writer. And as such, there are lots of aspects to the murder that are very literary and that kind of thing. So that sort of melding of self-consciousness of genre while writing murder mystery is just something that I'm very interested in at the moment. Talk about some sci-fi fantasy stuff. I have picked up The Rules and Regulations for Mediating Myths and Magic, which is an absolute little alliterative moment there, by F.T. Lukens. This, I believe, became on my radar because I was looking at a list of recommendations of Native American fiction to pick up. And I think this sounds really fun. The main character, he really needs to pay for college, so he kind of tries to ignore all of the weird aspects of his new job, but then one day he is literally pulled to the bottom of Lake Michigan by mermaids, and it's like, can't really ignore that much longer. This seems like one that is hopefully going to be a lot of fun. Even the cover looks really fun, so I'm very excited to try this soon. And then I also have The Three-Body Problem by Sijin Liu, which is translated by Ken Liu. This is on my radar because of Unicorn, who I find some really interesting books through. However, I have not read the back because when she was talking about it, she said that she thought the back gave too much away. So all I really know is that it is about sort of a very classic tale, start point, I believe, of like humans and alien civilization meeting for the first time, and then the problems that sort of arise as a result of that. I have not read the back because I was told that it exposes too much, but I know that this is banned in China and was very controversial there when it was released. And also, she just talked about it in a way that sounded really interesting. So definitely one that I'm intrigued to actually read without much knowledge going in. Some fantasy that I picked up on my Kindle include Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I feel like I've seen this one around a lot, but it is based on some Chinese mythology about the story of the Moon Goddess. And this is one that I thought was YA, but the more I hear it reviewed, I understand that it's actually adult fiction. And it's a bit of a romance. It's a bit of a sort of a questing narrative where she has to like fulfill these things and go on this journey and do some stuff. Yeah, I've heard quite mixed things about it, so I'm interested to see what I think of it. And I also picked up The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, which was kind of because it was part of the like Sapphic trifecta, and lots of people were posting about it. I was like, hey, it's cheap on Kindle, let's give it a go. Classics that have entered my life recently include The Song of Roland. This one is translated by Glyn Burgess. This is a very famous like French classic that is based on this clash that happened with the forces of like Charlemagne. It's one that I sort of learnt a bit about when I was at university, and I did a medieval romance module, but I've never actually read, so I'm intrigued to see what that is like. I also have The Romance of Tristan by Beryl, which is Tristan and Isolde Tristan, that myth cycle. I think the thing about Tristan and Isolde is that they are present in a lot of Arthurian mythos, so I have sort of tangentially read things to do with them in some of that reading. But this is all focused on them. So this is a prose translation by Alan S. Fedrick, not Frederick, Fedrick. I also have The Story of the Stone, Volume 1 by Cao Zhujin, which is translated by David Hawke. This is a very iconic Chinese classic. I thought I would just buy Volume 1 first and see how I get on with it before buying Volume 2, just to make sure I enjoy it and like it. It's also known as The Dream of the Red Chamber. That's the other name that you might know this one by. The first part of the story is the tale of Bao Yu, who is a gentle young boy who prefers girls to Confucian studies, and his two cousins. Through the changing fortunes of their family, this rich magical work sets worldly events, love affairs, sibling rivalries, political intrigues, even murder, within the context of the Buddhist understanding that earthly existence is but an illusion and karma determines the shape of our lives. Sort of bouncing off of that a little bit is Confucius, the Analects. My partner has lent this to me because he's just finished reading it. This is a collection of Confucius's sayings that have all been brought together. I feel like I know about Confucius, but I don't actually really know much about what he was actually saying and what a lot of his writings were about. So that's going to be really interesting to learn. Speaking of books my partner lent me, he also lent me Neighbours from Hell, English Attitudes to the Welsh by Mike Parker, which is very small, but is just examining English attitudes towards the Welsh. That is hopefully going to be eye-opening and enlightening. Just to tack another piece of non-fiction on, I also picked up The Appendix, Transmasculine Joy in a Transphobic Culture by Liam Coneman. It was only £1, and I thought to myself, this sounds like something that I need to read and understand better. The appendix was originally moments that the author was collating that were like moments of transphobia within his life. And then it sort of turned into this. And then that all obviously began to take a bit of a toll on his mental health. So then it sort of became into this with him asking questions and challenging stuff like, how is beauty in transmasculinity found, and how is it maintained in a transphobic world? So this is a perspective that I'm really looking forward to reading. A bit of a sort of, I'm not sure if this is like historical fiction, thriller, not really sure, but I picked up The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters. I've previously only read The Handmaiden? No, that's not what it's called. That's the film adaptation. What is the original book? I can't even remember the book's name right now. It's lent to a friend. It's been lent to a friend for a while. Gone for like maybe this is historical fiction because it's set in 1922. A widow and her daughter are obliged to take in lodgers. The lodgers that they have bring with them like lots of like technological advances, like a gramophone and music and fun and colour. But because this is Sarah Waters, I understand that this is like a crime, and so presumably at some point like something dodgy is going to happen, and we're going to have to potentially to do with these guests. and we're going to have to unspool that sort of crime mystery. Another piece of historical fiction that I picked up is The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. We are following 17-year-old, I cannot remember the character's name, I cannot remember any characters' names, I'm really sorry, Chinese American. She lives in Atlanta and she is the lady's maid to this very rich lady, but by nights she is contributing to a newspaper, and she has a column, and this column begins to absolutely explode in popularity, and she decides to use this power to sort of address some of society's problems that she sees. But I gather that there's a bit of a backlash to this. So yes, that's an interesting piece of historical fiction that I'm looking forward to diving into. And finally, I also picked up two books that I have already read before, but I want to reread. The first of these is The Air Affair by Jasper Fforde. I really enjoy Jasper Fforde. I like to have a Jasper Fforde every time I take part in Dewathon in March, which is a Welsh readathon where you just read Welsh authors. The Air Affair I have read before. It's the first of the Thursday Next series, and Thursday Next is like on the trail of this guy who has been kidnapping characters from books. So there's like this ability in this world to like go into books and change them and take people out of them and that kind of thing, but obviously it can cause absolute havoc. And so Thursday Next is sort of trying to stop this person from abducting all of these book characters. It's one of those that I read many, many years ago, and I remember really enjoying it, but I really don't remember the plot very well, and I think I would really love it still, so I'm really excited to actually reread it and to find out if I do. And then finally, I also have The Bedlam Stacks by Natasha Pulley. Natasha Pulley is one of my favourite writers. There's just something about the way she writes that I find absolutely delightful. This is not necessarily a direct sequel to The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, but it is, as you become aware, much later in the plot, set within the same world of it. It's set in Peru. The main character that we are following has been sent to Peru to try and find these particular trees that grow there because their bark can be used to make quinine, which is needed to combat malaria. So it's this sort of like alternate reality, like Victorian kind of era stuff. But while he is in Peru, he sort of comes into contact with this guy who is a priest, and shenanigans ensue, things develop. It does tie a little bit into the Watchmaker of Filigree Street world, as you become aware. I, again, just want to be able to remember it much more than I currently do. Those are all the books that I wanted to talk about. A bit of a mammoth, and there will be another mammoth soon, and then we will finally be caught up, and everything will be good. But in the meantime, I would love to know if you have read any of these. Please do let me know your thoughts on them. Or have you picked up any interesting tidbits lately that you think I would like? I know I'm on a book buying ban, but that doesn't mean I can't file them away on my Goodreads and Storygraph shelves for ages until such a point as I am buying books again. Yes, in the meantime, otherwise, I hope you're having a really lovely day. I will see you next time for something different.